Today we dip our toes in the world of natural citrus fragrances. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel. Today we're talking fragrances, and this is a first impression comparison between Guerlain Acqua di Pamplelune and Acqua di Parma Bergamotto di Calabria from the Blue Mediterranean line. In this video series I compare and give my first impression on two fragrances, usually in sample form, that I selected to cover a specific topic. This is not a fragrance battle. I'm not necessarily here to find which of the two fragrances is better. I'm here to open a conversation and talk about the wear experience. As mentioned in the intro, today we dive into the world of beautiful natural citruses. We have two amazing fragrances here. One is the Guerlain Acqua di Pamplelune and the other one is Bergamotto di Calabria from Acqua di Parma. Yes, this is another first impression with a full bottle. I got this in a trade and actually received this today. I smelled this many times, so I sort of know what this smells like, but I never gave it a full wear and I never wore it directly on skin. So that will be a new experience. On the other side, Bergamotto di Calabria, I actually never really smelled. And I have experience with the Blue Mediterranean line by Acqua di Parma. I had Figo di Amalfi, which is absolutely gorgeous. And actually, Figo di Amalfi, if I remember correctly, has grapefruit specifically on the front, which might be more comparable to this. But hey, I stumbled upon this sample a couple days ago and I thought it would be the perfect pairing for a comparison with this one here. What I'm expecting from these two is a very refreshing, tart, invigorating, zesty, zingy wear experience. Very citrus forward on both and not very much longevity and body in the dry down. Yes, these two fragrances are very simple and very natural because both houses have this classical traditional approach, but the notes in the dry down for both of them, which actually differ, and I'll get to that in a sec, they don't really suggest this huge boost of performance and massive longevity. These are not meant to be that. These are both eau de toilette, at least the Acqua Liguria is. I'm not really sure about the Acqua di Parma, but they should wear it like an eau de toilette, and I'm expecting a very cologne style wear experience in general. Before we start, let me just remind you how all this works. I'll be spraying these both on skin, left and right arm. I'll be talking about the opening and initial evaporation. I'll be giving some tidbits about the houses and my impressions with them and experiences. Then I take a break, which is usually 1 to 2 hours. It might be less in this case. I talk about the dry down. I give my forecasted longevity, use case, value for money, and all that jazz. Another thing before we start, yes, I got this in a trade. It's a full bottle in my possession, but I'll try to be as objective as possible and try to not seek confirmation bias. I have no problems admitting that a purchase or a trade might be a failure, and I have no problems admitting that some fragrance might be better than the one I own. If that's the case, if the wear experience doesn't satisfy me, I'll just trade it off and move on. Okay, let's start it off. I'm going to start with the Acqua di Parma in my left arm. I'll be giving 4 sprays of this little sample. I don't know what the atomizer is like, but given the fact that the Guerlain is a full bottle, I'm expecting a lot more power. All right, here we go, 4 sprays. 1, 2, 3, 4. Atomizer, not so great on this. This is an official Acqua di Parma sample. Again, Acqua di Parma is not a terribly expensive house, so I'm not expecting Amouage level samples here. Opening is very beautiful as I was expecting. There's surprisingly not much alcohol evaporation. The fruitiness and the citruses are beautiful. They're very realistic. They're very natural, very tart, and very uplifting. You're almost getting my mouth to water. I had to remind myself that this was a bergamot. Initial impression, I almost got a lemon, maybe a lemon mixed with a grapefruit type of thing. And yes, the bergamot does smell kind of like that, but bergamot has a very specific type of smell. It's a weird citrus because it's this green citrus with a heavy rind. It's not really edible, and it has a green, oily type of smell. I mentioned this already in Bergamasque, and Bergamasque is very different from the opening of this because Bergamasque has a much more synthetic, almost like a cleaning product type of smell. Very potent, very in your face. This is very beautiful, very natural, very airy, but it definitely still has some of that oiliness from the bergamot. I can definitely detect that. There's also something else in here, something herbaceous. It's giving this minty type of feeling. It might be mint, it might be basil, it might be something like that. It's really radiating off my skin and I can really smell it a lot in the air. Beautiful sillage, beautiful projection. I don't think it's gonna last very long just because I know Acqua di Parma and they don't make heavy scents, but the scent profile itself is very pretty, uplifting, natural, and very, very photorealistic. While we wait, let me tell you why I selected these two. In my Hermès Eau Givrée review, I mentioned that the most beautiful part of that fragrance specifically was the opening. And I also said that if I were to go with that fragrance, I'd rather just go for a citrus forward and citrus dominant fragrance. And these are exactly that. that. These were selected to be that. I even mentioned Pamplelune in that review as one of my go-to choices for citrus-forward fragrances. And although these do have notes in the background that are supposed to emerge in the dry down, I'm not expecting much of a dry down specifically. These are fairly gimmick-free type of citrus fragrances. And what I mean by gimmick, just to recap, is the use of a strong base to sort of prolong the wear experience of citrus fragrances. And my usual example for this is Xerjoff. They use a lot of musks, vanillas, and ambers to sort of aid the citrus opening on a lot of their fragrances. And this is not bad at all, but we have to acknowledge that those are not necessarily citrus dominant fragrances, but it's actually like a citrus vanilla combination fragrance. And I might sound like I'm nitpicking here, but there's actually a huge difference because most of the fragrance wear, especially from a Xerjoff, is the dry down. And if you wear something like Torino 21, yes, you get that beautiful, absolutely beautiful opening, but ultimately you're stuck with the dry down for the majority of the wear for the good 5 hours later once the citruses are gone. So yes, I'm not expecting much from these two except for the beautiful, brilliant citrus opening and not much longevity in that. But back to Bergamotto di Calabria. Yeah, still the same. As I mentioned, the surprising lack of initial alcohol blast from the spray is definitely strange. And the fragrance really opens up as is. And after however long this has been, maybe 5 minutes, I'm already starting to detect some of the vetiver in the base. Very slight, but there is this woodiness coming through. And again, this does remind me of Figo di Amalfi. In Figo di Amalfi, actually, the fig tree note, the woody fig tree, was very prominent, and I could detect it almost from the opening. All right, let's move on to Acqua di Pamplelune. Yes, this is a first impression, and I know I shouldn't be talking too much about the presentation, but the cap here feels exceedingly cheap. And this plastic netting here is moving on my bottle. I'm not really sure if it's on all bottles or whatnot, but if these two components were metal, this presentation would be absolutely exceptional. Okay, so I gave 4 sprays on my left arm of the Bergamotto. Let's give, maybe start with 2 with the Pamplelune. Let's see what happens. Yeah, this is absolutely a huge amount of fragrance per spray, so we'll keep it at 2 just to make it fair. I definitely have to let the alcohol evaporate for a moment. In the meantime, let's talk about Guerlain. Guerlain is a house that I really appreciate. I don't have a ton of experience with. I owned one of the Acqua Liguria line. It was the Mandarin and Basil one, but I found it a little bit too sweet for my taste. Upon sampling this and the other ones, these are pretty easy to find in shops. I also sprayed the Yuzu Oud one. That was good and interesting, but it was a little bit too deep for my taste, especially because I wanted to fill in this niche here. I wanted that refreshing, tart, mouth-watering citrus note. Acqua di Pamplelune is a fragrance that I've been wanting for a while. For some reason, I really was postponing the purchase, although you can find these at pretty great prices. This is a 125 ml, and you can find these all day around where I live for like 60 to 70 bucks. It's an absolute steal for the price, no matter how the performance is, just because it's a Guerlain and it's high quality. Every time I tested and smelled this in a shop, I remember being ecstatic about how beautiful and natural the grapefruit note was. Let's give it a smell. Yeah, it's exactly how I remember. But I have to say, it's actually way more subtle than I was expecting. Maybe it's a type of note, the citrus is in here, that really works better on paper. And yes, my skin is actually known for absorbing like acidic notes, like the black currant and a lot of fragrances on my skin. It's not very detectable, and that sort of like acidic, pissy type of note is eaten up by my skin chemistry. So I guess that there's that. Both of these fragrances are pretty light, so you probably could spray them on clothes to aid longevity. And given the beautiful citrus opening on both, I can already tell, these are pretty much overspray proof. This is such a beautiful fragrance, and the grapefruit note in here is not your usual white, bitter grapefruit. This smells a lot more like a rose type grapefruit, which is a whole different variety altogether. It has a very distinctive smoothness to it, almost if there were florals to aid the fragrance. It smells almost like there's a tinge of rose in the backbone. And it might actually be the first notes of the dry down that I'm detecting. The dry down for this is supposed to be vanilla, musk, and maybe some flowers, so it might be that. Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful, addicting, and refreshing. Actually, both of these are. I think that for the opening alone, I would find myself just respraying constantly just to experience that uplifting fizziness that you get when you spray. Wow, going back to Bergamotto di Calabria, I really noticed the difference between the two. There's a stark difference. The Pamplelune is so much more feminine in character. Not necessarily feminine only, like a feminine fragrance, but it has such a more subtle, delicate character. The Bergamotto di Calabria is much grittier and harsher in a way. The bergamot here is really leaving that oil trace, that signature bergamot oil feeling. And I can definitely start smelling the vetiver in it and the woodiness in it. It almost smells dirty compared to the Guerlain. Not in a bad way, it's just really masculine and really rough. I'm actually surprised how beautifully these two complement each other. Not necessarily because they smell similar, because they smell nothing alike as of now, but because they almost represent the two extremes of this fragrance concept. On one side, the Bergamotto di Calabria is very masculine, oily, and sort of gritty. And on the other side, we have this incredibly subtle, soft, rounded grapefruit. Very beautiful. I think that they're both amazing, and I'm actually already considering to get a full bottle of the Acqua di Parma. Now that the initial alcohol evaporated from the Guerlain, the Pamplelune is actually more intense. It smells a little richer. I'm still not getting much sillage compared to Bergamotto di Calabria. This is a much fainter smell. And on my skin at least, it's a lot softer and a lot more subtle. I'm really happy I decided to make a comparison between these two, but I think it's time to give them the moment to dry down and see what happens. Okay, I'm back earlier than usual. I decided to put a timer for 30 minutes to see what would happen, and after 30 minutes I thought that the fragrances still had something to give, so I just reset the timer for another 30 minutes. So it's been about an hour and change here, and the fragrances have evolved to a point where I feel that they're in their last stage of the dry down. And I'm not necessarily saying that the fragrances are done or they're gone, but I don't think that they're going to change much more from this. Once again, I want to note that these fragrances are not necessarily meant to be long-lasting fragrances. The notes in their bases and the dry down experience as a whole is more like a complementary, subtle transition from the beautiful opening. The opening is definitely the star of these two fragrances, but the dry down is definitely notable. And I actually think that the dry downs, within their subtlety, because they are subtle, will hang around for quite a bit, but it's definitely more of a skin scent type of experience for both of these. We'll start out with the Acqua di Parma. So the Acqua di Parma actually really transitioned a lot. It smells completely different from the opening. The citruses, the bright tartness of the citruses is almost gone. The bergamot transitioned completely into its most oily green state. And what I get now is a ton of the base notes. So there's a lot of woodiness, there's a lot of vetiver, and that vetiver there has an ashy, earthy facet that almost makes it dirty. And by all means, dirty is a very strong word for this because the fragrance is still very clean and classical. There's nothing that is unappealing or offensive whatsoever. But the vetiver has this distinct masculine type of facet to it. It's the type of vetiver that you smell in old school traditional colognes. Very Acqua di Parma-like, definitely. At this stage, I would say that the fragrance is definitely a skin scent, but it's a fairly noticeable skin scent at that, just because the notes in the base and the dry down are very noticeable and they don't really blend in well with your skin chemistry at all. You get this very detectable, mossy, earthy, woody type of thing, almost like the base of Aventus. I think that this would be very appealing for the general public. You have to get close to smell it, but once you're there, it's really apparent. The Guerlain dry down smells completely different, and it's almost like an opposite to the Acqua di Parma. I'm so happy I chose these, and they happen to be almost like opposite to each other in this concept. I can definitely still get the grapefruit. It's subtle, but it's there in the background. It's a lot more bitter, it's a lot more oily, and it almost reminds me of like the dried grapefruit and something like a potpourri. The main event here is now the muskiness, the vanilla, and the florals. You get this very subtle, elegant, and beautiful concoction that really blends in well with your skin. And I said this for the Xerjoff again. Xerjoffs to me are like the masters of the dry down because they adopt this musky, vanilla, ambery thing that, yes, might be the same for many fragrances, especially the ones with Chris Maurice at the helm. but that dry down is remarkably good at blending in with the skin, and it sort of elongates the perception of the fragrance as a whole. Just because you don't really notice when it's gone. And this dry down sort of feels the same way. It's incredibly subtle, way more subtle than the Acqua di Parma, but at the same time it's so subtle that it almost gives your skin like a natural sweetness and cleanliness. This feels like you just came out of the shower or bath, like you have this beautifully moisturized and clean skin. The dry down for the Guerlain is definitely less detectable. It's very much a skin scent, and it's an intimate skin scent at that. Yes, I only sprayed twice, and you might want to spray a lot more, especially given the 125 mLs and the cheap price. But with 2 sprays only, I feel that I really have to get very close to even just acknowledge that the fragrance is there. Overall impressions is that these are very beautiful, very happy to have tried them. I'm actually really considering getting a bottle of Bergamotto di Calabria just because it's so interesting in its traditionalness. And actually, this aspect of being classical and traditional is going to come into play when talking about the general practicalities, which are next. And speaking of general practicalities, let's just dive into it and let's talk about use case right away. These are very refreshing, sunny, energetic fragrances. These are definitely for the day wear. They can go casual, and you can definitely wear this even in your sweatpants or at home, almost as an aromatherapy type of thing. But at the same time, I think that these would dress up remarkably well, and they would be excellent for like a daytime formal event, maybe like a daytime reception for a wedding or any type of other formal ceremony type event. And speaking of that traditional classical approach, I almost feel that this is a trick of these fragrances, meaning that they're so traditional and so classical that at this stage, in this modern landscape of all these vanillas and ambroxan bombs and all these blue fragrances, these actually smell innovative, paradoxically. And they smell different and unique and actually really high quality. These fragrances are unique in the fact that, again, in this modern fragrance landscape, you can easily detect the ingredients in them. And anyone can, even non-frag heads or non-fragrance aficionados. Due to this aspect alone, I'm expecting these to leave great impression and might even get you some compliments. Seasonal versatility, I would say it's average. These are definitely more for the warmer weather. Not because of the scent profile per se, but it's more because of the vibe. These really scream energy, daytime, sunny. They scream summer. They scream saturated colors, they scream happiness, and those are more emotions that you would associate to more of a summer wear. I already touched on this, and although leaning a little bit more masculine and feminine, I think that they both are very unisex and they could both be worn by anyone. I would be absolutely happy to wear both of these. They would have different vibes, obviously, but I would be absolutely comfortable and happy to wear both of these. Age-wise, I would probably say that you need a little bit more experience to wear these. I just can't see a late teen, early 20 just really appreciating this. That kind of audience will probably lean more towards like a modern blue type of fragrance. I'm talking males specifically, and like a vanilla heavy scent for the evening. Expected longevity is quite low. I'm expecting these to last maybe 4 to 5 hours at most. The skin scent aspect might last a little longer, but again, it really depends what you expect from the fragrance. If you're okay with the skin scent, by all means. I'm really addicted to the opening of this, so I would probably find myself just reapplying constantly. And as I said before, you just can't really overspray these. They're mass appealing in an elegant, simple way. I just can't see anyone being offended by any one of these two scent profiles, so spray away. Value for money, I think, is also exceptional for both of these, especially for the quality you're getting. The Guerlain, you can find 125 ml for around 60 to 70 bucks. The Acqua di Parma, as far as my memory goes, I think it's a little bit more expensive. I remember 75 ml going for like 50 to 70 bucks, something along those lines, but it's still very good, especially, again, for the quality you're getting. This is like traditional high-end perfumery here. Overall, I think that you can't go wrong with either of these two. If you like French perfumery, if you like traditional perfumery, you have to give these a shot, definitely. Honestly, the more videos I do, the more I'm forced to talk about fragrances, the more I find myself appreciating simple fragrances that really showcase one note. There's something special, there's something pure about fragrances like this, or even like the Acqua di Parma, which really embrace the simplicity and the traditional aspect of perfumery These two really remind me of the fragrance houses from south of France and Grasse and their beautiful, elegant, and traditional approach. And I can comfortably say that given my experience with these two specifically, but also my previous experiences from the other lines, you can have the same kind of effect, the same kind of elegance, the same kind of subtle elegance with any other one from the line. So if you want a little bit more sweetness from Guerlain, you can go with the mandarin one, you can go with the yuzu one for a little bit more depth, you can go with the rose one if you want a little bit more florals, and the same with the Acqua di Parma. You can go more sweet, more tart, more woody, more herbaceous, you name it. The choice is really vast here. As I said before, these two and the others from the line are the definition of subtle elegance. You owe it to yourself. If you're a fragrance aficionado, you have to get your nose on the Guerlain or on the Acqua di Parma line. As for this bottle specifically, I know it's a little bit early, but not only I am expecting to be keeping this, but I might actually be integrating it with another one from the line, or maybe just pairing it with a new Acqua di Parma. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to Viral, feel free to subscribe. It always helps the channel and it's massively appreciated. If you want to interact with me in any way, feel free to leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always respond and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much for your time. Another first impression down, many more to come as usual. See you in the next video. Cheers.